Jupiter in the 7th house. Partnership expanded. Welcome to Jupiter in the 7th house in synastry. In this overlay, we explore what happens when one person's Jupiter falls into another person's 7th house, the house of partnership in its fullest and most formal sense. Marriage, business, open negotiation, and contractual bond. Before going further, a clarification that matters more here than almost anywhere else in this series. The 7th house is frequently spoken of, in popular astrology, as simply the marriage house. And while marriage and committed romantic partnership are certainly part of its domain, this reduces a much broader signification down to its most appealing single case. The 7th house is properly the house of all formal partnership and open dealing with others as equals or counterparts. This includes spouses, but it equally includes business partners, legal adversaries, and, significantly, open enemies. In traditional astrology, the 7th house governs not only the people one binds oneself to willingly, but also the people one stands directly opposite: rivals, litigants, the other party in any formal negotiation or dispute. It is the house of the other, in the fullest sense. The counterpart one faces across a table, whether that table holds a marriage contract or a lawsuit. Any treatment of Jupiter in the 7th house that speaks only of romance and marriage is, therefore, telling only part of the story. And in this overlay, the part left out matters. Jupiter's essential nature, as throughout this series, sets the underlying terms. Jupiter operates through expansion, through increase, generosity, and the widening of possibility. And the 7th house, as an angular house concerned with significant, formal counterpart relationships, gives that expansiveness considerable scope to operate. This is traditionally considered one of the more favourable houses for a benefic to occupy, since angular houses carry real weight and visibility in a person's life. And Jupiter's generous nature applied to the house of formal partnership tends to produce something genuinely substantial, for better or for worse, since expansion, as this series has repeated at every house, enlarges whatever it touches without independently verifying whether that thing deserves enlarging. The 7th house, in traditional astrology, governs marriage and committed partnership, yes, but also business association, formal contract, and, this is the part most often left out, open conflict. The 7th house is traditionally where one finds open enemies, as distinct from the hidden enemies of the 12th house. It is the house of whoever stands across from you in a defined, mutual, and formally acknowledged relationship, whether that relationship is built on love, on commerce, or on open opposition. Jupiter holds no formal dignity in the 7th house, no domicile, no exaltation, no joy, but its placement on this particular angle gives it real prominence regardless, simply by virtue of the house's own significance and visibility. From the Jupiter person's perspective, the house person tends to be experienced as a worthy counterpart, someone substantial enough to negotiate with, partner with, or take seriously as an equal. The Jupiter person often brings a generous, expansive quality to whatever formal bond exists between them. A willingness to be magnanimous in negotiation, optimistic about shared ventures, inclined to give the house person the benefit of the doubt in matters of partnership and commitment. Where the relationship is romantic, this frequently shows up as genuine enthusiasm for formalizing the bond. Marriage, in particular, often emerges as an appealing prospect under this overlay, since Jupiter's instinct toward expansion finds a natural outlet in the idea of binding oneself more fully and publicly to another person. From the house person's perspective, the experience is often one of feeling taken seriously and treated generously as a partner or counterpart. Whatever the nature of the formal relationship, romantic, professional, or otherwise, the house person tends to receive the benefit of Jupiter's natural largesse, more good faith extended, more willingness to compromise, more optimism about the partnership's eventual success than the house person might receive from other configurations. Where the relationship is romantic, this often translates into a felt sense of being genuinely chosen, Not casually, but with the kind of serious, forward-looking intent that makes long-term commitment feel like a live and appealing possibility. At its most constructive, in the context of romantic or marital partnership, this overlay is frequently cited, with real justification, as one of the more favorable configurations for marriage in the whole of synastry. The Jupiter person's generosity toward the bond itself, combined with the house person's experience of being treated as a worthy and valued counterpart, can produce a partnership marked by genuine goodwill, mutual optimism about the future, and a shared sense that the relationship is something fortunate rather than merely functional. Business partnerships under this overlay can flourish similarly, with negotiations conducted in good faith and ventures approached with a confidence that tends to be at least somewhat self-fulfilling. But the seventh house's full domain requires that this overlay also be examined in its less appealing applications, because Jupiter's expansive touch does not discriminate between the partnerships one would choose and the ones one would not. Where the seventh house relationship in question is adversarial, an open rival, a legal opponent, an openly acknowledged enemy, Jupiter's presence there expands that conflict in precisely the same way it would expand a marriage. An open enemy with Jupiter's benefic influence in this position may prove a more formidable, more resourced, or more far-reaching opponent than the dispute might otherwise have produced. The conflict itself may grow larger, draw in more parties, or extend over more time than a more contained seventh house configuration would allow. This is an important corrective to any treatment of Jupiter in the seventh house that assumes the house's only business is romance. The same expansive principle that makes a marriage feel abundant can, applied to genuine opposition, make that opposition harder to resolve or contain. Even within the more conventional romantic application, Jupiter's characteristic excess produces a shadow specific to this house's concerns, where Jupiter's inflation in the fifth house distorts pleasure, and in the fourth house distorts domestic foundation. In the seventh house, it risks distorting the commitment itself, producing a marriage or partnership entered into with more enthusiasm than scrutiny. Jupiter's optimism about partnership can make the idea of binding oneself to another person feel so appealing, so fortunate, so clearly meant to be, that the more exacting question of actual compatibility, actual readiness, and actual shared values receives less attention than it deserves. Marriages formed primarily under this overlay's enthusiasm, without sufficient grounding elsewhere in the synastry, risk discovering after the formal commitment is made that the partnership's substance has not quite kept pace with its promise. There is also a pattern worth naming around generosity in negotiation, whether romantic or contractual. Jupiter's instinct toward magnanimity is, in most circumstances, a genuine asset to partnership, but unchecked generosity in any formal arrangement, business or marital, can tip into a failure to negotiate one's own interests with appropriate care. The Jupiter person, or the relationship as a whole, may extend trust and goodwill past the point that the actual terms of the partnership warrant, assuming, in keeping with Jupiter's basic nature, that abundance and good faith will simply continue without the more careful attention that durable partnership of any kind actually requires. The distinction between this overlay's nourishing and inflating expressions tends to rest on whether the optimism it generates toward partnership, of whatever kind, is matched by honest assessment of the partnership's actual terms. Jupiter expands the felt worth of formal commitment. It does not, on its own, verify that the commitment is soundly made, or that the counterpart in question is, in fact, a worthy one. When the Jupiter person's generosity toward partnership is paired with genuine scrutiny of compatibility and terms, this overlay produces marriages and alliances of real and durable substance. When that scrutiny is absent, the same generosity can produce commitments and, in the house's less appealing application, conflicts that have grown considerably larger than either party properly examined before entering into them. At its highest expression, Jupiter in the seventh house creates partnership of genuine substance and goodwill, marriages entered into with real and justified optimism, business alliances conducted in good faith and mutual benefit, and a formal bond that feels, in the best sense, fortunate for both parties. The Jupiter person's instinct toward generosity and partnership finds, in the house person, a counterpart worth that generosity. The house person, in turn, gives the Jupiter person's expansive goodwill a context, formal, mutual, and significant, in which it becomes durable, rather than merely diffuse. When balanced, Jupiter in the 7th house creates favorable conditions for marriage and partnership, mutual goodwill in negotiation, and a formal bond approached with genuine and largely justified optimism. When imbalanced, it can produce commitment entered into with more enthusiasm than scrutiny, generosity that undercuts one's own interests in negotiation, and, where the 7th house relationship in question is adversarial rather than affectionate, a conflict expanded rather than contained. At its core, this overlay is about the experience of being formally and significantly bound to another, as spouse, as business partner, or in the house's less celebrated application, as open counterpart in conflict, and finding that bond enlarged by Jupiter's presence. The question it poses, and that only the two people involved can answer, is whether that enlargement has been honestly examined, or whether it is, for now, simply the considerable and unexamined feeling of a partnership, or an opposition, that has grown larger than either party has yet fully reckoned with.
This was Jupiter in the 7th house in Synastry Overlays. Thank you for listening. Next, Jupiter in the 8th house.